How to edit duct in PractiCAD. PractiCAD offers a variety of ways to edit the duct as you're working. You can edit individual pieces all the way up to entire duct lines. Virtually everything in PractiCAD can be edited on the fly. The following set of tutorials is going to show you the various ways to edit duct and the different techniques you should use in different situations. Part 1 of duct line editing is how to edit a single fitting. There are two ways of doing this in PractiCAD. First, we can do it from the AutoCAD property box, and second, we can do it from the edit fitting command. To access the AutoCAD property box, all you need to do is double click on the entity in the system. You can also click on the entity once with the left mouse button and then right click as we're doing here and select properties. That'll also open up the property window. Once you do that, you'll be able to see all of the properties inside the ACAD property box related to that entity. For example, if we would like to switch the width in to 32, we can just simply type in 32 and hit enter and the duct will change. Here we're going to take depth and type in 24 inches and we're going to hit enter. Now you can notice that the duct is changing and the tags are changing along with it. You can see here we have elevation tags as well. The duct line grows from the center line of duct. So when we change the depth, you can see that the duct's depth changed above and below the center line, therefore changing the elevation, what was bottom 5 foot to 4 foot 9. To change elevation, all you need to do is click on the duct, go to your elevation box, and here you will see all of your choices listed. You can see bottom of duct at 4 foot 9. Just simply type in whatever elevation value you want here. Here we're going to do 5 foot, and you can see that the tag has reflected the change and the duct has raised up in elevation. So for anything in the AutoCAD property box, all we need to do is double click on the fitting, go to the AutoCAD property box, and then make the change. You can do this 100% of the time for every single property unless a property is locked. And this we go over in further tutorials. The second way to edit your fitting is to use the edit fitting command that PractiCAD provides you with. In this tutorial, we're going to close down the AutoCAD property box and we're going to look at our fitting. We're going to left click once with the mouse and then right click and go down to the option that says edit fitting. If we choose edit fitting, PractiCAD will open up its edit fitting window. Here we can choose different views for the entity we're holding. We can zoom in and zoom out either with standard wheel mouse commands or the pan, zoom, and orbit buttons you see here. And all we need to do is basically choose the parameters we want. For example, I can roll with my wheel mouse up or down to select a different width in, or I can keypad in the number 40 and it will change. Notice that next to every single parameter, we've got locks that can be locked or unlocked. Here you can see we have connector in and out as TDF and TDF. They were initially locked. If something is locked in this window, you will be unable to change it from the AutoCAD property box. For example, if we do go back and click on these little locks to close them, we can change any parameter you see here in the AutoCAD property box, but we'll be unable to change TDF. Once we've made the changes we want, we're going to press OK. PractiCAD will exit out of that window and make the change. To demonstrate how parameters are locked, we're going to double click on the fitting and we're going to come into the AutoCAD property box where it says TDF. And I'm just going to try to change it here from TDF to S&D. Notice the second I do that, PractiCAD changes it right back. That is because the property is locked. If something is locked, we must click on the fitting again, right click, go back to edit fitting, and then unlock those parameters and press OK. If we do that, now from the AutoCAD property box, we can change any single parameter we want. Here you can see we've switched the connection to S and D. In this segment, we're going to explain the different fabrication levels PractiCAD offers. We're going to click on our duct here and then take note in the AutoCAD property box. Underneath technology properties, we have a place for fabrication level. you will notice that PractiCAD offers 3 fabrication levels: cut and label, label only, and order. Dependent upon which fabrication level your ductwork is in, it can have a role in how your duct edits. The first one, cut and label, basically means that this duct is going to go to the plasma cutter. Therefore, it's not going to follow any standard set of rules for finished length with coil line, which is what label only is for. It's simply going to mean that whatever properties you put in, PractiCAD is going to accept them. For example, we've switched the fabrication level to cut and label, and now we're going to come over here and change the connection to slip and drive. Notice when we switch it to slip and drive, it does not affect anything else. It doesn't affect the length in particular. If I come over here and decide to switch the length to 45, it will automatically adjust the fitting to fit exactly what it is we've typed in. So cut and label means we're going to fabricate this fitting, send it to the plasma, and it shouldn't follow any rules in terms of default stock length. However, now we're going to switch the fitting to label only. Note the second we switch it to label only, that PractiCAD has readjusted the length of the fitting. And the reason why it's currently at 57.5 is because we have half TDF and half slip and drive. We're actually losing 2 inches from a 60-inch default stock length fitting. We're losing 2 inches for the TDF and a ½ inch for slip and drive. What we're going to do is switch them both to TDF. Notice the second we do that the length adjusts. What label only means is that first, we should send this fitting down to a sheet shear list or download it to a coil line. And second, it means that it should follow the default stock options you have selected in your library ductwork options. To show you where that is, again, we're going to click on library. And then we're going to go over and click on the word ductwork. Notice here we have use default stock length. It's checked. And for rectangular, we have 60 inches. If you choose label only, PractiCAD will make sure that as you change connections, that the finished length of the duct meets this stock length. If you change it to 48 inches, it would adjust to that. Currently, it's on 60. So what we're going to do is exit out of the library. You'll notice by clicking on the duct and coming over to the AutoCAD property box, now if I make any change to the connectors, for example, we're going to switch the connector into slip and drive and then the connector out to slip and drive, you can see that this customer has it set to lose a ½ inch on each side. So our finished length here is going to be 59 inches when we're done. But it's coming from a 60-inch default stock length. Now, it will stay on label only up until you make a change to your length. For example, if I come up here currently and I take length and switch it from 59 inches and I change it to 44 inches and hit enter, right there you'll notice that PractiCAD says you are not following the default stock length, and therefore we're going to switch the fabrication level to cut and label so it sends it to the plasma. If I switch it back to label only, PractiCAD will re-edit the fitting and make sure that based on the connections that it meets the default stock length. So you can choose between cut and label only. This shift will most of the time be automatic. However, you can choose to change the fabrication level at any time. The last and final fabrication level is order. Order simply means that we would like to download this to Practicam and possibly get a report. We don't want to send it to the plasma. We don't want to send it to the coil line. It's just an ordered entity. Often, whenever we create catalog items like heatos or stamped elbows, things we're purchasing, we set the fabrication level to order. Quite often, we use order as a condition to make sure we don't download something that should not be fabricated or should be fabricated. So this is the explanation of fabrication level. Once again, cut and label means follow any parameters we put into the system. Changing connections will not change the length. We're going to send it to the plasma. Label only means that if we go to make any change, for example here we're going to switch to TDF and TDF, it should auto adjust the length to meet our default stock length, and it should download to a coil line or to a sheet shear list. And last we have order only. Order only will have no effect on the fittings parameters. It's used generally to pick off duct that should be purchased or to download stuff to Practicam that would get reported but not be fabricated by plasma, coil line, or spiral machine. Another way to edit inside Practicad is to use the stretch nodes that we provide. If you go to click on a piece of duct, you will notice that Practicad will provide you with 3 different nodes. First, we always have the blue square node. This represents the side of the duct or the hold point that Practicad has listed in the fitting parameter box. For example, here you can see in the fitting parameter box under the fitting tab, it says we're holding it by the in, and therefore the in will be the blue square. If we were to switch it to the out, you can see that the blue square will switch. Now on the opposite side of the blue square is always an arrow that points in which direction we're capable of stretching the duct. For example, if I would like to stretch the duct, I can click once with my left mouse button, pull it in the direction we want, and click again to release. Or you could click once, hold it in the direction. You can see it's 70 inches. We're going to type in 15 and hit enter. So you can type in a numerical value and it'll stretch the duct in that amount. So if we would like to then take the duct on the opposite side and shrink it this way, we'd have to come up to the fitting parameter box. We'd switch the node so that the arrow is on the other side. You can see here now we're holding it by the in, so we're capable of stretching it by the out. And now I'm going to pull this arrow in this direction and going to type in 25 and hit enter. Okay, so we can edit in either direction. The last node you see are the double arrows. The double arrows have one specific function: to move a fitting or piece of duct up or down the order it is in the duct line. For example, here you can see we have a little 18-inch piece of duct. We're going to click on it. Then we're going to hold down with the left mouse button and we're going to drag this fitting to the right. Notice that it snaps to the next joint. If we now click on the button again and release, you can see that Practicad will move that fitting over. So if we wanted the little joint to be close to the elbow, we could just grab the node, hold it in the direction we want, click again to release, and now we've got that particular fitting all the way down the duct line. And this should work for virtually any fitting in the software. In the next section of duct line editing, we're going to show you how to use the specification by geometry option inside Practicad. Specification by geometry is an option we have underneath your library icon in your Practicad ribbon or Express toolbar. Underneath your ductwork options, you can see under duct line editing we have an option called specification by geometry. Currently it is unchecked. The recommended settings for Practicad though are that it should be checked at all times. However, in this tutorial, to explain what it does when it's unchecked, we're going to leave it like this for now. We're going to exit out of my library and take a look at the fitting we have on the drawing. Notice that this fitting is in the 2-inch water gauge specification, and for this tutorial, that specification calls specifically for TDF connections on the in and out. The way specifications work inside Practicad is once you give a specification and assign it to a piece of duct, that specification is active 100% of the time, which means that when you go to edit the duct, Practicad will reapply the specification. What specification by geometry means is that when it is unchecked, any change to any type of property will force PractiCAD to reapply the specification, meaning we have geometry type, technology type, and identification type parameters in the software. If that button is unchecked and we make any sort of change, each time we make a change, PractiCAD will reapply the specifications. For example, let's go and take the connector in and switch it to slip and drive. Then let's take the connector out and switch it to slip and drive. Currently, we've now changed the fitting so it's slip and drive and slip and drive, even though the specification calls for TDF parameters. Now let's exit off by letting go of the fitting and reselect it later. Now we're going to come over to the technology properties and we're going to switch acoustic liner and change it to 1-inch acoustic. Notice the second we do that, PractiCAD has reapplied the 2-inch water gauge spec, so therefore we now have the TDF connections that our specification table called for. Most contractors, if they go to add liner or change an accessory or a technology parameter, don't want PractiCAD to reapply the specifications. So what we do is we go back into the library icon and go to the ductwork section. Here we are now going to check the specification by geometry parameter. Once again, this is the recommended setting. We're going to hit the save key and then exit out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on the fitting and we're going to undo what we just did. We're going to take away the liner and then we're going to switch the connections back to slip and drive and slip and drive. Now, even though the specification is calling for TDF, I could let go of the property box, reselect the fitting, and now if I make a technology parameter change or an identification parameter change, PractiCAD will not adjust these connectors. For example, we're going to come into acoustic lining and we're going to choose 1-inch acoustic lining. Notice that the locks or connections did not change because we only changed a technology parameter, not a geometry parameter. However, if we come in here and now change the depth of the fitting from 20 to 22 and we hit enter, you can see we've now changed the geometry parameter. So PractiCAD has reapplied the specification table that was assigned to this duct. This is a very important option to make sure that you don't make one change to your fitting and then when you go to make another change to your fitting, it undoes the fitting change you just made. So this is an option we recommend keeping checked. However, it is always a matter of draftsman preference. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to utilize the editing feature Specification by New Duct Only. This option was designed so that you will only have PractiCAD apply specifications to duct at the time duct is placed on the drawing. However, once you go to edit the duct later, it will not reapply the specifications. For example, currently we have a duct line which we drew with a 2-inch water gauge specification. You can see that it's calling for TDF connectors. What we're going to do is we're going to make a change that goes against what the specification is calling for. And the change we're going to make in this tutorial is we're going to take the connector out. We're going to switch it to slip and drive. So what we have now is a connector in the middle of this duct line that is actually not what the 2-inch water gauge spec table calls for. We've changed it to slip and drive, but PractiCAD, the spec that it was under, says it should be TDF. Now, if this option, specification by new duct only, is unchecked, and we're going to go into where that is in a minute, what will happen is if we go to change the duct line, anytime we go to make a change, for example, here we're just going to say within will be 30, you could see that PractiCAD has now reapplied the specs to all the duct on the line, or all the duct that was changed. Therefore, you can see that the spec table called for TDF, and it added TDF the second we made a change in size. However, if we would like to change this option off, we can do so by adjusting an option underneath the library icon. What we're going to do here is we're first going to undo the edit we made. so that we've got the duct line with TDF connections, and here you can see once again we have the slip and drive. We're going to go into the library icon on the PractiCAD ribbon. On the left hand side, we're going to go into ductwork options by clicking on the word ductwork, and all of your ductwork options will open up. Currently under duct line editing, at the bottom we have here an option that says specification for new duct only. Now this is different than specification by geometry only. What this does is if it's checked, PractiCAD will only apply specifications at the time you place duct down. After that, it will not reapply specs regardless of any change. That is different than the option for geometry, which applies specs if a geometry parameter has been changed. However, this option will never reapply the specifications at any time. You would have to uncheck it in order for PractiCAD to reapply specs. So what we're going to do for this tutorial is check the option. We're going to hit the Save key on the left-hand side, and we're going to exit out of Library. Now we're going to go back and just double-click on the first piece of duct in this duct line. And once again, we're going to change the width to 30. Now notice that we have a slip and drive connection. And we do know that the 2-inch water gauge spec we're using here does call for TDF. However, because of the option we have checked, if we change this to 30 and hit enter, you can see that PractiCAD edits the whole line. It does change the width of all of the entities, but it has not changed any other properties. Therefore, the slip and drive has not changed to TDF. So you can choose to keep the option on, specification by new duct only. How to use your Allow Incompatible Connectors option. PractiCAD has an option that makes it impossible for you to make a change to the duct line that'll have two connections that do not belong attaching next to one another. For example, TDF and slip and drive are generally what we would call incompatible connectors. Therefore, PractiCAD should stop us from allowing us to make a TDF connection attach a slip and drive connection. You can see currently we have two pieces of duct on the drawing. We're going to click on this duct right here, and then we're going to go into the AutoCAD property box, and you can see that it is a TDF connector on the out. What we're going to do is then click on the fitting next to it and take a look at the connection on the in. You can see here that the connector in for that fitting is TDF because TDF and TDF should go together. If we now come and change the connector in of this fitting here and switch it to slip and drive, notice that PractiCAD has changed the connector out of this fitting to slip and drive as well. What it's done is it went through the libraries in our allowance section and found what connector is supposed to be compatible, and it changed it. If we would like to disallow this option so that we can put a TDF connection and attach it to a slip and drive, we need to change this in our ductwork options. To get there, we're going to go into the library icon on the PractiCAD ribbon or Express toolbar, and we're going to go to the ductwork options by clicking on the word ductwork here. Here you can see there is an option that says Allow Incompatible Connectors Junction, and currently it is unchecked. This is the recommended settings for PractiCAD. Because it's unchecked, what PractiCAD is doing is when I go to make a change to one connector, it goes and finds the compatible connector and then changes that one. So it'll usually adjust two fittings at once. However, if I check this button and then hit the Save key to allow incompatible connectors, now when I go into this fitting and I switch the connector out from slip and drive to TDF, you can see that PractiCAD has not changed the fitting it's attached to. We actually have a slip and drive and TDF connection in the system. Now this is disconnected. However, PractiCAD is allowing this to happen because we have that option checked. Once again, the recommended settings are to keep that button unchecked at all times. If we go back into Library and we go to look under the Allowance section, here on the left, when we go down to Allowances, we can open up by hitting the little plus key and we could click on the word connector. Now there are separate tutorials on how to make things compatible and incompatible, and they are controlled here. But basically that option, if checked, will allow you to put two connectors together that don't belong together. So it's recommended to go into ductwork, go to allow incompatible connectors junction, uncheck that, save it, and leave it there on most drawings. That concludes the tutorial on allow incompatible connectors. How to edit duct lines in PractiCAD. The next series of tutorials is going to teach you the various options you have when you go to edit an entire duct line in PractiCAD. Just like editing a single fitting, we can also edit an entire duct line. The first step in editing an entire duct line is to make sure that all of the duct is connected from the beginning of the line to the end of the line that you want to change. To do that here, we're going to highlight our duct line and we're going to use a duct line check automatic. And there are separate tutorials on duct line check. But we're going to click on this button and PractiCAD is going to show us here that the ends of the duct are where they're supposed to. There are no other breaks in the duct line, so we know based on these red marks that this entire duct system is connected. We're going to hit escape, let go of all of the fittings, and now we're going to click on duct line check again, and that'll remove the marks. The first change we're going to make is an elevation change. To change the elevation of a duct line or to move it up a specific amount as a duct line as a whole, other than using the AutoCAD move commands, we can just simply click on the first fitting we'd like to change and then change the elevation of that fitting. If we move that fitting up 2 feet and all of the other ducts are attached, the entire system will move up 2 foot. We do not need to highlight all of the ducts, just the first one on the change. So what we're going to do here is you can see this duct is at 10 foot up the line, and then a little further down the line you can see this is at 10 foot as well. What we're going to do is click on the first piece of duct on the line. We're going to come over to the elevation box. We're going to type in 12 foot bottom and hit enter. Once we do that, you can see that the entire duct line, both up and down the line, have adjusted. The whole duct line has followed this particular fitting. Now if we wanted just 1 or 2 fittings to edit or move an elevation and not carry the rest of the duct line, we must break the duct line. For example, if we want to just move up fitting 1 and fitting 2 and not the third fitting, we would actually delete the third fitting. Then we click at the beginning of the duct line we want to change, and then we would make the change, let's say back down to 10 foot. Then we'd of course use an auto route or a single to attach the duct line, but the idea is we've only moved the specific section of duct we want. If it's connected, it's going to edit all the way forward or backwards in the duct line. The next part we're going to show you in duct line editing is how to choose the direction you're going to edit the duct line. PractiCAD allows you to edit just one or a group of fittings together. You can edit the duct line forward, the duct line backwards, currently selected duct, or you can also edit the entire duct line as a whole. To be able to choose whether you edit duct line forward or duct line backwards, we're going to focus on the transition in the middle of the line. Currently, we're going to click on the transition. And notice that we've got the 3 nodes that PractiCAD makes available when we highlight duct. And if we go into the fitting parameter box and click on the fitting tab, you can see here that we're holding this duct by the in node, which is being represented by the blue square. So currently you can see that the arrow is pointing in the direction that we're actually going to edit the duct line in. It means that we're going to edit this duct line forward in this tutorial to start. So what we're going to do is double click on the transition and we're going to come over here to the top change. Notice that currently it is 0. What we're going to do is, because we're holding this duct by the in and we're going to edit from the in joint to the out joint in this tutorial that happens to be duct line forward, notice that if I take top change and make it 3, once we hit enter, PractiCAD will edit the duct line forward. So it raised the transition up and duct line forward was edited. However, if we were to take that top change and move it back to 0, and then switch the direction we're going to edit the duct, and we're going to do that by going to the fitting box, and notice right now that the blue arrow is pointing in this direction. But the second we go to switch it to out, you can see that the blue arrow is now pointing in the opposite direction. This is going to indicate that we're now going to edit this duct line backwards. So if we come here and now hit top change 3 and hit enter, you can see that it edits the duct line backwards. And once again, if we come up and say top change -3, Practicad's adding the duct line backwards. So by controlling our nodes forward and backwards, we can choose the direction that we edit in. Now we're going to teach you how to use your duct line editing options. There are 3 basic options when you go to edit full duct lines in Practicad. To access them, we're going to go into the library icon on your Practicad ribbon or Express toolbar. And then we're going to come over to the ductwork options. To do that, we're going to click on the word ductwork. We're going to come down to duct line editing, and we're going to look at the 3 main options. Change duct to transition, keep duct size at turn, and keep duct size at transition. Specification by geometry is in other tutorials. The first duct line editing option is change duct to transition. For this tutorial, we're going to keep it checked. What change duct to transition does is it makes it so that if we make a size change in the middle of the duct line, Practicad will compensate for that change by putting a transition at the fitting before or after the change. This will of course be dependent upon the direction you are editing. Currently we're going to click on this fitting in the middle of 3. You can see by the arrow it is going to edit duct line forward in this direction if we make a change. We're going to double click on the fitting and look at the property width in. If we go to change the width in from 36 to 44, you can see the changes that Practicad has made. First, it has made a change up to the transition going forward down the duct line. So in other words, this fitting and this fitting, both properties are currently 44. However, you can see what it's done here is because we were editing forwards and the size change should be forward, Practicad does not want to edit the duct line backwards when change duct to transition is checked. What it does is it replaces the fitting that was rectangular duct, and now you can see that it is a transition. Name of the fitting is transition. So change duct to transition, when checked, will put a transition before or after the fitting we change. For example, if we actually hit Control Z to undo and then switch the direction we make the change, notice if we click here, now the arrow is pointing duct line backwards. If we now go and change the width in to 44 and hit enter, you can see that Practicad is compensated by putting a transition here. So the direction makes a difference as to which side the transition is placed. If we go to undo that and uncheck our change duct to transition in our library icon, here we can see what Practicad would do when the option is not selected. We're going to uncheck change duct to transition. We're going to hit the save key and we're going to exit out. Now what we're going to do is once again, we're going to say let's hold the fitting we're going to edit by the in. And we're once again going to click on this fitting here. And then I'm going to right click and go down to AutoCAD properties. Here once again, we're going to change the width in to 44 and then hit enter. Notice what it does. It makes the entire duct line change. What it does is it's actually going to carry the change forward and backwards, up and down the duct line, up into our next fitting. It could be a transition, an elbow, a T, but it's going to go up the line and down the line to our next fitting. So if we'd like a transition to be placed automatically at the size change behind us, change duct to transition should be checked. If we want the whole duct line to change, we can uncheck it. If we are going to use the change duct to transition option we must be able to make sure that PractiCAD selects the transition that we want to use to fill in that gap automatically. For example, if we currently have our setting checked back to change duct as transition, we click on this fitting and change the width back to 30, you can see here that it's editing the duct line, and PractiCAD, by clicking on the transition that it's been added, you can see that it's using the name transition. That is the specific transition it's using. However, let's Control Z to undo what we've done, and let's change our settings so that it uses the finish length transition or maybe a custom transition instead. In order to select the transition you want PractiCAD to use during the edit, we must go into our Auto Duct button on the PractiCAD ribbon. On the left-hand side, notice that we have the routing button checked. Here we have it under single wall, and we've then got rectangular, round, and oval choices. This happens to be a single rectangular transition change, so we're going to check single wall and rectangular, but obviously we can choose between the three. Whenever we go to make an edit to the software, PractiCAD's options or the fittings it selects are coming from this Auto Duct section. Currently, notice that we have a place called sizing, and you can see that the fitting that is currently selected is the transition. This is the fitting that's currently selected when a size change needs to be made. Therefore, PractiCAD went back into this section and chose this fitting. If we wanted our change duct to transition option to use a finished length transition, we can switch it right here. If we switch it in Auto Duct once and then press OK, now we can have the settings set that when we go to adjust this fitting again, it will use the finish length transition. So we're going to double click on this fitting. We're going to move that width in back to 30 and hit enter. Notice when we do that, we're going to now double click on the fitting PractiCAD has selected. We go down to the name, and you can see that it has chosen the finished length transition. So we can adjust the specific fitting that PractiCAD will use during this option. That'll conclude the tutorials on change duct to transition. How to use the keep duct size at turn option in PractiCAD. PractiCAD gives us the ability to choose whether or not an edit will carry up to an elbow or through an elbow. For example, let's double click on this transition right here. And then what we're going to do is change the width out to 30 and then hit enter. Notice when we do that, the PractiCAD has taken the edit, moved it up the duct line forward so that these two pieces are 30 by 18, but right here at the elbow it stopped and it did not adjust the elbows out. You can see that the width out of this elbow is still 26 by 18. However, if you would like the ability for the edit to go through the elbow and carry down the duct line up until the next fitting, we can choose to do so in our ductwork options. We're going to choose this option by going into the library icon on the PractiCAD ribbon or Express toolbar. Then we're going to go over to the ductwork options section by clicking on ductwork. Here you can see that under duct line editing we have an option that says keep duct size at turn. Currently it's unchecked, which is why the change only went up to the elbow and didn't carry through the elbow. Now we're going to check it, hit the save icon, and then we're going to exit out of the library. Now what we're going to do is go back to the transition. We're going to double click, and we're now going to take the width out and make it 34 and hit enter. Notice that this time PractiCAD has carried the change all the way down the duct line through the elbow to the end of the duct line or up until the next fitting. So we have 34 by 18 on both sides. It carries the change all the way through the duct line. Now keep duct size at turn also has another feature. It's got a dual function inside PractiCAD. To demonstrate, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a piece of pipe in the system and we're going to set it at 12 inches in diameter. And then we're going to place it on the drawing. If we are working on continue and we're going to grab an elbow, a 3 gourd elbow, and we're going to hit C spacebar for continue. You can see that when we do that, PractiCAD has resized the connector out, or the diameter out, of this fitting to match the diameter in of the fitting. However, if we uncheck that option in library, we will not get PractiCAD to resize the out to match the in. For example, we're going to uncheck keep duct size at turn. We're going to hit the save key, and then we're going to exit out. Once again, we're going to grab a 5 gourd elbow, and notice that when we go to grab the 5 gourd elbow, it only resizes the diameter of the in portion of the elbow and not the out. So keep duct size at turn will have two functions. One, it will always resize the out parameters to match the in parameters, so you don't have to change them on input. And it will also allow it so that if you make an edit up or down the duct line, that edit will carry through the elbow instead of up to the elbow. How to use your change duct size at transition option. PractiCAD gives you the ability to make sure an edit will either carry up to a transition and stop, or carry through the transition to the fittings afterwards. For example, if we double click on this fitting in the beginning of the duct line and take a look at the arrow, which is currently pointed to the right, indicating that we're going to edit in that direction, you can see here that the width in is 36. Notice that the fitting after the transition has width in as 28. We're now going to take the width in here and we're going to change it to 42 and hit enter. Notice that PractiCAD only changes duct line forward all the way up to the transition. However, if we would like as a preference for that edit to carry through the transition, we must change our options in the ductwork options button. To access that, we have to go into library icon inside our PractiCAD ribbon or Express toolbar. On the left hand side, we're going to see the ductwork options. We must click on the word ductwork and the options will open. Here you can see we have keep duct size at transition. It's currently unchecked. Once again, that means that if we make a change, the change will carry up to the transition but not through it. For this tutorial, we're now going to click and check this option, keep duct size at transition. We're going to hit the save key and then exit out of my library. Now what we're going to do is double click on the fitting in the beginning of the duct line, and we're going to make the change again. This time we're going to take the width in and make it 36, and we're going to hit enter. Notice when we do that PractiCAD has not only made the change up to the transition, but it's carried through the transition, so the fittings afterwards are also 36. So this option will allow you to carry changes up to transition or through the transition, whichever you prefer. Now this function serves a dual purpose in PractiCAD. It also takes part in a role whenever you're going to input a new fitting on continue. For example, currently we have a piece of duct that is 24 by 18. We're going to go to the fitting bin and we're going to grab a finish length transition. And notice that I happen to be on continue and that it snapped the transition to the piece of rectangular duct and not only resized the parameters for width in and depth in to match the duct it was snapped to, but it took the width out and depth out parameters and made sure they match as well. So what it does is it makes sure that the width out and depth out parameters match the width in and depth in whenever you're on continue. If you remove this option, PractiCAD will only change the width in and depth in to match whatever you're snapping to. To demonstrate that, we're going to go into the library icon, ductwork options, and then we're going to go down to the keep duct size at transition, and we're going to uncheck it. We're going to hit the save key and exit out once again. And now what we're going to do is grab the same transition out of our fitting bin, and now we're on continue. You can see that it has changed the width in and depth in to match what we're attaching to, but it has not adjusted the width out and depth out. So it serves two functions: making sure the width out and depth out match width in and depth in on continue, and making sure that the change will carry up or through the nearest transition. That'll conclude the tutorial on change duct to transition.